Welcome to Perfect-ish, where it's not about having perfect time management, but about perfecting your relationship with time. I'm your host, Callie Brigham, and every week we'll talk all things time and how to maximize it without burnout or guilt. Whether we're chatting with an expert or I'm sharing my 20 years of time management experience, you'll learn simple strategies to make every moment count. Here, it's all about getting close to perfect-ish. So let's synchronize our watches and dive in. Hi, friend. Notice anything different? This is a bonus episode, and it's going to be a fun one, and it's going to be a good one. And I'm going to start it off with a story. Some of you may be familiar with the yellow house. It is quite iconic in my world and for people that know me and know a little bit about it. So back in 2003, my mom and dad, but mostly my mom, she was building her dream house on Pensacola Beach. And she was doing all the things, picking out the cabinets and the flooring and you name it. And one of the very important things that she was picking out was the color of the house. She decided that yellow sounded perfect. So I was down visiting her, and she decided that it was a great day to start driving around neighborhoods looking at yellow houses to help her decide which color exactly of yellow she wanted for her house. Now, you may think there's just a couple shades of yellow. You would be thinking wrong because I'm here to tell you there are so many different colors of yellow out there. And it wasn't just a butter yellow or a daffodil yellow or a mustard yellow. No, we had to see what the color looked like in the morning light and the afternoon light and at sunset because it had to be perfect. And I'm a very decisive person. So it was probably the first or second house that we drove past. And I said, that's it. And my mom tends to take a little bit more time in her decisions. Love you, Mom. I know you're listening. And she just really wanted to make sure that it wasn't the first house that she saw or the second house. It was, the 150th house that we saw. That color was so important. She picked it, painted it, dream house, you get the idea. And for many, many, many years, the house was yellow and hence the yellow house. I know, we're super creative, aren't we? Well, years would go by, and in 2013, in a most miraculous turn of events, my husband Josh and I ended up buying the yellow house for our little family to live in. My parents no longer lived there. They actually only lived there about a year. So we were buying it from the next owners. And it was such a God story, let me tell you. Again, I don't have time today. It's a long story long. But we ended up buying the yellow house. And again, anybody that came to visit us, anybody that knew about it, you'll have to excuse me. In this episode, I am about 2 weeks into this cough, so hopefully it won't be very distracting. But I actually think it's quite perfect that there's a little imperfection on today's podcast. We'll get to that in a second. Back to the yellow house. So that's just what it was known as, right? I even had somebody who didn't know exactly where I lived, but they knew the general idea. And they were like, I spotted your house because it was the yellow house. All right. Yeah, you get it. The yellow house. Well, then the pandemic hit. And like everybody else, we were stuck at home. And that meant home projects. I remember cleaning out every single drawer, every single closet. It was one of my ways of coping. My husband started doing projects in the garage, which he's not really a garage project kind of guy, but he did. And we decided, okay, the last thing that we're going to do as part of our big home project makeover, we're going to paint the house. Now, I'm going to give my mom a little grace now because as we were deciding what color we were going to paint it, the outside, I had a lot of paint swatches on several different sides of the house because I wanted to see what the colors look like in the morning light and the afternoon light and at sunset, right? The north side of the house, the south side of the house. And so we finally settled on this really beautiful slate blue gray color and we painted the yellow house. But here's the funny part. It's still kind of known as the yellow house. As a matter of fact, I'll be sharing on social and in our Facebook community a painting that my girlfriend Savannah had commissioned for my birthday after we painted it. And it is a picture of the yellow house. So ironically and crazily enough, people still call it that, even though it is no longer yellow on the outside. So, why do I tell you that story today? What does that have to do with anything? Well, just because that, of course, is always now going to be called the Yellow House, I want you to know that this podcast, I'm sure, in some circles, will always continue to be known as the TikTok podcast. That's how we started. That's what we were for a year. But you know what? It's time. It's time. Just like we repainted the yellow house, it's time for a new coat of paint. It's time for a new season. It's time for a new name and a new adventure. So please, everyone, welcome to the stage the Perfect-ish podcast. Perfect-ish, which is time management for your beautifully imperfect life. I even have a hat that I'm wearing. So if you're watching on YouTube, and I've already been asked if there's going to be merch. Absolutely. So if you want a trucker hat merch, that's coming for sure. But just as important as merch is the podcast rebrand. So this is a milestone for us, a little over a year into the podcasting world, and it is time for a fresh mission. Same heart, but still focusing on what this looks like. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about what perfect-ish means. So hold on to your hats for just a second. But I want to go back and tell you a little bit about why I changed the name. So when I first started, before even podcasting, I started walking and talking. And it stemmed from getting home from a trip and having major reentry. And so in my stories, I just started to talk about how do you handle reentry with your time management? And that started to snowball into answering questions for people and realizing that time management was a real niche that I loved working with women on. So I would walk and I would talk about time. I love names. I mean, I renamed myself all growing up. For a while, I named myself Lulu. As a matter of fact, one time I was flying to my grandparents. This is back when you could just like put a kid on a plane and then the parents would show up on the other end and get them. And so I got on the plane and landed in Indianapolis, and my grandparents picked me up, and the flight attendants kept saying, "What a good job." I was probably 5. Lulu had done the whole time. And my grandparents were like, "Who is Lulu?" That was me. I just changed my name. And if you know me, you may also know that Callie is a nickname. So I like names. I like changing them. It's just kind of who I am, I realized. So I like to be creative in it. And through thinking, okay, walking and talking in time, TikTok just kind of came to the surface. And it was a great first name. However, I realized that even though we've done a lot right here on the podcast, I also kind of did a lot wrong. And you don't want a name of a podcast that you have to spell and explain every time you tell somebody. So people would ask, "What's the name of your podcast?" I was like, "TikTok, but not that TikTok." And like TICK space TALK. And that, yeah, that's just probably not great branding. And about 6 months ago, I started working with a branding company called Brand Builders Group. If you want to know more about that, you'll definitely need to DM me. It's been life changing. You can look them up and check them out. One of these days, the founders, Rory and AJ Vaden, will be on this podcast. Let me just tell you. But I started realizing that, again, a lot was right and some things were wrong. And so it was time to start redefining who we were, what our brand was, what that looked like. And a big part of that was our name. And so one day I was walking, shocker, and I was thinking through lots of brainstorms like world domination while in the carpool lane and, just all kinds of things. And I thought, like I really, I'm not a recovering perfectionist. Somebody said that to me one time. I was like, nothing to recover from. There's nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, I definitely know that perfect is a myth, right? So I was thinking, well, how can you be perfect but not quite perfect? And perfect-ish came crashing into my head. And I played around with it. I put it on a couple of t-shirts. I wore it to a couple events with Brand Builders Group. I put it on a hat. And you know what? It just stuck. There's a charm about it. There's an understanding about it. Every time I share that name with a woman kind of playing around with it, she just kind of looks at me as like, "Oh yeah, I get it. I get it." Because here's the deal. Perfect-ish is not about perfection. It is the art of perfecting one thing at a time. That's what we do here on the podcast. We take one concept, one idea, one small thing, and we just work to perfect it. And life isn't perfect. We get that, but we can still make progress. We can align with what matters. We can show up fully in that. So here we are in our rebrand season, right? In our rebrand era, and we're making a declaration. And the declaration is you can be ambitious in your life without burnout. You can be driven without guilt. You can be successful without sacrificing what matters most. And this all has to do with your time. So here's what you can expect as well. Same quality content, hopefully even better. Same heart, hopefully even fuller. Even more clear mission to help you stay at the top of your game. Beautifully imperfect, but totally aligned with your values. So I am really looking forward to some great guests, many of whom, as a matter of fact, the first 3 guests are all part of the Brand Builders group. How do you like that? We're going to elevate the content now that we can be a little bit more specific on what this looks like. That's been part of the journey too. Who are we? Who are you? Who am I? And what really matters to us? Plus, more things to come like beta testing, some workshops, even developing my one-on-one clients. So, if you will give me just a moment of your time, I want to unpack a little bit about what this is going to look like. I'm going to read it to you so I get it right. I don't have it memorized yet. What exactly is Perfect-ish, this time management podcast for your beautifully imperfect life? Well, here's the deal. If you are an ambitious, purpose-driven woman who refuses to let burnout or overwhelm hold you back, mastering time management isn't just a nice idea. It's essential. And you don't need a flawless system or a perfect routine. What you do need is a way to perfect one thing at a time while focusing on sustainable productivity, balance, and purpose. How's that sound? So, this is where this intentional time management meets ambition and clarity. Prayerfully, this podcast is your go-to guide for creating a life where you're at the top of your game without sacrificing your well-being. Every Tuesday, so tomorrow, if you're listening in real time, tomorrow, first Tuesday of 2025, we will have, of course, our regularly scheduled episode. This is just a bonus one. So every Tuesday, a new episode of Perfect-ish will drop. And it's going to be still a mix of solo episodes and insightful guest conversations packed with practical strategies, expert advice, and real life experiences. So you might be a mom or a business owner, you might be a creative, or you might be navigating corporate life. Welcome. And you deserve a system that works for your unique system and your season, your rhythm, your aspirations. So we're going to get practical and intentional, not just managing time, but aligning it with your values and goals. So here's what that's going to look like. You ready? Number 1, mastering your priorities and time allocation. That sounds fancy, but really all it means is learning to prioritize your non-negotiable tasks and your personal growth and your work commitments. So you're dedicating time to what really matters. When you're clear on your priorities, your calendar is a reflection of what you value, not what you feel obligated to do. Get it? Number 2, setting time boundaries that actually work. And boundaries aren't just about saying no, it's about saying yes. We learned that through this last year. We say no to one thing, we say yes to what fuels you and energizes you. So it might be family time, it might be focused work blocks. We're going to strategize on how to protect that fiercely, but gracefully. Number 3, effortless planning and time optimization strategies. Hello. We're going to discover how to streamline your weekly planning. I love that one of the things we learned this last year through a client was we don't plan on Sundays. We plan on Fridays. We not only weekly plan, we meal plan, we grocery order, all those things. And that's a workflow that will help us save time and reduce mental clutter and create action steps. So we're going to learn how to work smarter, not harder. Number 4, sustainable productivity habits without burnout. We discuss habits and routines that build consistent long-term progress without burning out. It's a rhythm for our businesses, our relationships, and our inner world. That means we work on balancing work, rest, social time, personal growth with intention. Okay, just a couple more. 5 is reclaiming margin. Time for you and time for what matters. So true time management isn't just about productivity. And this one's hard for me. It's also about margin. and it's about rest. So building time buffers that prevent overwhelm and allow space for what truly feeds your heart and mind. And then number 6, perfect-ish, not perfect, but embracing progress over perfection. As a matter of fact, if you write the word P-E-R-F-E-C-T, and then right next to it, write the word P-E-R-F-E-C-T. They look the same, and it looks like perfect. But one, you can pronounce it perfect, and the other you pronounce perfect. That's what we're doing, perfecting. We're not going to chase the illusion of perfection. We're focusing on progress, small wins. Remember, we don't start strong, we start small. And sustainable change. How about a done it list instead of an never-ending to-do list? How about celebrating progress and showing up even if it's not perfectly polished? So that's where the expert interviews, the insights, the strategies, the reflections, we're going to work together on it. We're not focused on squeezing every minute out of a day. It's making every minute count. So let's move beyond just managing time and master it with intention and focus and a commitment to our perfectly imperfect life that's going to be aligned with your ambitions and heart. You ready? Okay, every Tuesday, a new episode of Perfect Dish is going to drop with those strategies and conversations and the community. Don't forget to plug into our community. You could always find it in the show notes. And this is going to help you stay focused and aligned. And we're going to live our beautifully imperfect life with purpose. So are you ready? Are you ready? I'm ready too. Okay, so here's what's happening. Next episode, Word of the Year episode, one of my absolute favorite traditions that we have. It's not about piling on pressure. It's about giving yourself a guiding star. If you already know what your word is for the year, perfect. That's great. We're going to be unpacking how to implement your word and how to focus on your word. If you don't have your word yet, hey, all good. I'm going to support you in helping discover what your word could be. So thank you. If you have been part of the TikTok tribe, is what we called it from the beginning, some of you even from our launch team, I'm so overwhelmed with gratitude for what we've done together. So continue on. You are in the right place, even if the name looks different. If you are a first timer, because maybe now with the rebrand, you just discovered us, welcome. Everything's always in the show notes, links to DM me and contact me if there's certain great ideas that we have from our guests or calls to action from them or promotions or discounts, all in there. You can find our Facebook community in there, our social, and more. So here we go. Kicking off this new season, season 2, perfect-ish. So many great things to come, and we're going to do it together. So remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about making progress. And don't forget, no matter what, perfect-ish is absolutely enough. Let's do this. God bless. Thanks for tuning in to the Perfect-ish Time Management Podcast. Let's keep the fun going. Follow me on social and join our Facebook community. And if you're ready for some one-on-one time management coaching to reach the top of your game without burnout or guilt, I'd love to chat. Book a free interest call using the link in the show notes or send me a DM. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a 5-star review and share it with a friend who's ready to master their time too. Remember, we're in this together, making real progress towards becoming perfect-ish.